What's up, producers? Welcome to Low End Candy. I'm Bohemoth, and today we're going to be talking about reverb. If you're not sure if you're using reverb right on your track, or you're getting a muddy mix, or you're just new to reverb altogether, this video is for you. By the end of this video, you're going to know how to use reverb correctly and when and where to use it. Before I hopped in, I wanted to mention that I'm currently doing one-on-one mentorship lessons on AbletonLiveTeacher.com. If you're new to producing or you're not and you're just looking to accelerate your path to becoming a better producer, working with a mentor, be that me or someone else, is the absolute best way. Get your questions answered without having to sift through YouTube all day. So, great resource. Also, I'm doing new videos every day or every other day at this point, so like and subscribe. It helps a lot. Let's get into it. So let's start with talking about what is reverb. Well, the Google definition of reverb in acoustics is a persistence of sound after a sound is produced. Reverberation is created when a sound or signal is reflected, causing numerous reflections to build up, and then decay as the sound is absorbed by the surfaces of objects in the space, which could include furniture, people, and air. So to put it very simply, in music production, reverb is a spatial effect. So what I mean by that is, let's say that we're in a parking garage, and we clap. We hear all that reverb, and just by hearing a clap in a parking garage, you can tell that it's in a structure that's similar to a parking garage. Those specific reverberations puts you in a room and gives everything character. It's really building your soundstage and creating space and depth in your mix, and also placing things on the stereo spectrum. Now to start off, I'm going to give an example of the easiest way that I've learned to understand reverb. So going back to the parking garage comparison, if we're in a parking garage and we are far away and we clap, we get tons of reverb. And by hearing that sound, if we heard that, we would know that somebody is in a parking garage and they're far away from us. So in this example, putting us in a space and then also putting something way back, way far away from you. However, say I'm in the same parking garage and I'm in front of you and I clap. Now you hear the clap directly in front of you, but then you also hear all the reverberation behind it. So the way this kind of applies to us is, let's say we have an element that we want in the back of our mix. Let's say typically we want like our percussive instruments pushed a little further back than the kick and the snare and the mids. Adding reverb to those is going to make them sound further away, adding reverb directly to them. Let me show you an example. So here we have a basic percussive loop. Now if we take a reverb and we put it directly on the percussive instrument, now it's sounding like it's pushed back. It sounds like it's far away, like it's in a room, and that gives us space to bring more elements to the front. Now, instead of using direct reverb, if we use parallel reverb, which means that we have our completely dry signal, and then we also have our wet signal, you'll notice that we have our percussive instruments directly in front of us, and we also have them way in the back. What that's doing is it's giving the illusion that something's right in front of us, and it's also having those reverberations in the back. Using parallel reverb allows the synth to still be directly in the front of the mix. So it's not directly on the track and it's not pushing the synth away from us, but it's giving the synth size, it's putting it in a room, and it's making it seem bigger because not only do we have the dry signal directly in our face, we also have the reverb signal behind it. So using this parallel reverb in this way puts it in a room, in a space, and it also tells you the size of it. So understanding these two principles, we can kind of go over some reverb rules. The first one is reverb on low frequency creates mud. We've all seen those memes on Instagram about putting reverb on sub bass, and that we all clearly know it sounds bad, but some people still do it. The reason that is because when you put reverb on low sounds, all that low reverb really just creates mud and just muddies up your track. That's not to say you can't always put reverb on sub bass. You can put it on the higher elements of that sub bass. But reverb on low frequencies pretty much just equates to mud, so it's something you want to be careful of and stay away from. Reverb rule number 2 is that we typically only want to use small incremental amounts of reverb. Say we have a drum loop here. Put it at about -30 on the send. Now that very subtle, quiet amount of reverb here is actually doing a lot for the drums. So typically on drums, on a lot of elements, we usually only want to use a small percentage be that 15% or lower. Sometimes we want a big dramatic reverb where we'll crank that up, but for the majority of the time, you pretty much want a lower amount. Reverb rule number 3 is to adjust your pre-delay and your decay. These two aspects of a reverb unit will really help you dial in the reverb to how it's supposed to sound. So we have how long the reverb goes. Again, this goes back to what type of room, how far away everything is. That's going to determine the decay. Closer. As far as pre-delay goes, you typically want your instruments and everything to come through and then the reverb. This allows your track to breathe and still have reverb while maintaining the original signal. So for this, we want the pre-delay short, so it's coming in after the drums. So that's some basic information about reverb. Now let's talk about some different types of reverb. We have convolution reverb, which actually emulates types of spaces. So in Ableton, they actually have convolution reverb, which I believe is free on the Ableton website. And we have ones like this, which is Terry's Warehouse. So this convolution reverb is clearly meant to emulate a warehouse. See how it sounds. So a very big, very long decay sound. So that's kind of convolution reverbs are made to emulate different sounds. Here we have a big cave. Deep chamber. Empty warehouse. So there's tons of cool ones for convolution reverb, and they're a really good way to kind of place the listener in a certain spot. Next, we're going to talk about hall reverb. Now, hall reverb is used to emulate like concert halls. So hall reverb is used very frequently on like vocals and things like that. So it kind of gives that just that little echo of like being in a concert hall. Chamber reverb is pretty similar, but it gives kind of like a lush ambience. So this is good on instruments, stuff like that, even vocals sometimes. And then we have room reverb, which is just an overall good reverb to use on everything, primarily on sends. Getting into some sort of reverb plugins that are favored and are some of the more popular ones. We have Max for Live Convolution, which is actually one of my favorites, which we just went over. And then we have Valhalla Room. So Valhalla have absolutely phenomenal reverb units, but Valhalla Room is probably the favorite one that I'm aware of that producers are using on their reverb sends. So this gives you a really good room reverb. We have all these settings here, different presets and everything. Very good, high quality sounding reverb. Another one is Pro R. This is by FabFilter. This is, per Google, ranked one of the best reverbs out right now. Very high quality again, tons of different settings. Very comparable to Valhalla, just a little bit different of a sound. And then another one that's great for vocals is Neoverb. So Neoverb is one that Isotope came out with a couple years ago. And basically what it does is it's an automatic reverb, primarily used for vocals, but you can use it on anything. So you play a sound and it inputs the sound and then it kind of creates your reverb for you. Pretty neat. So to kind of show you how that works, we can select what kind of reverb we want. So let's say we want some dramatic, large, and dark. And then you play your sound. And it will actually make a preset for you based on what you played that you can adjust yourself. So this is a very good, powerful unit. Another one that a lot of producers like is Waves Renaissance, which I don't have available, but it's a great one to look into. So hopefully that was a good introduction for you guys for reverb. If you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. I hope you got something out of this video. And thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. More.